It is with great joy that we have His Eminence Archbishop Benjamin with us. And of course, always a great joy when we have His Grace with us, Bishop David, and all of you, all clergy and faithful, and those who are with us today. I'm fine. You talk that. I never talk on a microphone. He really needs no introduction at all, but we are grateful and thankful to the Lord, and also to God's help to have Father Nicholas with us. As I told him today, it would not have been as joyous a celebration if Father wasn't with us, but God still helped it and got him through. And with no further ado, we asked Father to give us a presentation, talk, and remembrance of the life of the cathedral and all that it entailed in his life and the life of Molodyko and his family and all you faithful. So so welcome, Father Nicholas. It's a joy to have you here with us today.
Glory be to Jesus Christ. I'm not as frisky as I used to be. So I had to get some help in coming up here. And I'd like to have all the members of my family stand up who traveled from near and far to be here today for this celebration. 5 out of 6 of our children and 8 out of 10 of our grandchildren are here. And we're very happy. Molodyko and I feel very much at home. And with Archbishop Benjamin here and Bishop David, I ask your blessings. I hope that I can give a presentation that will be helpful to everyone. I'd like to use the word inspiring. I don't know if it'll be that, but at least I would like to bring you to a kind of reality of being in this place where we are right now and what preceded it. That it didn't happen overnight. It happened over a many period of years. And it was only God's work that was accomplished that brought about the building of this cathedral and allowed us to do the things that we were able to do, to travel to so many different places throughout Alaska. And coming here tonight, what a joy to see so many of you from Bristol Bay, from Signic, from Prince William Sound, from the Kenai Peninsula, from Aleutian Islands, Pribilofs. It's just wonderful that you all came together tonight. And I was surprised that I would recognize so many people, because so many have already gone on to their reward. And I hope and pray that when the end comes for all of us, that we'll all be together in the heavenly kingdom of God. So I'd like to speak now a little bit. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit down. From a basement to a cathedral, the joys and sorrows of an Alaskan Orthodox mission. Where I'm sitting right now is where the altar was. And the iconostas came right here. And we had a church that you had to go up and then you went down. And later on, you'll see a picture of this. But it all started from here, from this very place. And then the cathedral was built on top. Next. An invitation came to me from Bishop Ambrosi of Alaska. And I remember writing to him, but it was a long time before he actually answered. And when he did answer, he said it would be better for me to come alone and then get our family settled later on. And we knew that the church was in a period of transition at that time, and Bishop Ambrosi was soon to be transferred or retired. So we waited until the new bishop would come, and that would be Bishop Theodosius, who became our metropolitan. Next. This is the letter that I received from Bishop Theodosius when he was in charge of Alaska as administrator, but was given the title Bishop of Washington, D.C. And I had a talk with him after he was consecrated bishop in New York City, and he assured me that he wanted me and Molodyko to come to Alaska and to organize a parish in Anchorage with the blessing of his Beatitude Metropolitan Irenee. On the top picture is Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, of course, is a major city with some 3 million people. And there's Anchorage. And Anchorage that you have here today probably is a city of over 500,000 people. But when we came, it was 100,000 people. It was very, very different from what it is today, how the city has grown. This was Mountain View, and we had a little home in Mountain View. It was a little cabin with moose horns over the entrance of it.
It was terrible.
And we had a basement where a married couple that were in the military lived. And we had 2 tiny little bedrooms. You had to go through the bathroom to get to the other bedroom. And there was a little tiny kitchen and a little tiny yard. And that's where we started out. We had moved 4 different times before we came to this property here. Many of you old-timers may remember Father Michael Oskokov and Molodyko Zoya. And there you see Father Michael and I with the Christmas star. And this was the first time that I was introduced to the Christmas star. And there's Molodyko Zoya when she was ailing a bit. And both of them have gone on to their reward. And Father Michael would serve services here infrequently at the old Providence Hospital, which was on 11th Street. This was our first home, the Holy Transfiguration Greek Orthodox Church, which now, of course, has a beautiful church up on O'Malley Road. And this was Ikonostas, and the remnants of the church were several people from the Greek church that were there, taking care of it, and everyone else had dispersed to different places. And at our first liturgy, which was on September the 10th, 1967, we had about 20 people. And from 20 people, it has grown to what it is today. What the limitations would be for the people, and seeing that many of them were poor, that many of them were not even able to come to church because they had no transportation, I thought, how in the world are we going to build a church? And I began thinking about the talents that the Alaska Native people had. And this woman here is Paraskovia Wright, when she was young and she had a little baby. And Paraskovia Wright was one of the old Alaskan weavers. And I'm happy to see that Agnes Thompson is here because she does the same type of work that Paraskovia did. And I asked Paraskovia, or in response to one of the homilies that I gave, and telling people about their talents and how they could contribute through their talents to the church, she made one of these Aleut baskets. And I looked at the basket, and of course, being a greenhorn coming from South 48, not knowing, I said, Paraskovia, how much do you think we could get for this, for the church? And she said, oh, 150 to 200. And Molodyko came up with the idea, and she said, you met Mike Kennedy down at the museum. Take it to him and see if he would do something for you. And he put it in a case. And he put our name on it and telephone number, and about 2 weeks later, somebody called. And we sold it for $150. That little basket today would be over $1,000, I'm sure, that was made. And this is how we began collecting together with people bringing their talents and contributing them for the church. I had no idea when I came to Alaska that I would be serving a hospital with some 60 to 75 Orthodox patients at one time. Many of them were on the 5th floor in the tuberculosis ward because at one time tuberculosis was a great epidemic in Alaska, and the hospital was built basically for that purpose. And I had no idea that we would have so many. And so I had several of the men in our parish make an altar that would have a storage area in the back. And we kept it up in the solarium on the 6th floor, and there we would gather together to celebrate Divine Liturgy. And I would administer to the patients, and sometimes we would have anywhere from 75 to 100 people, with some of our people coming from the church to sing the responses. She would help me, and then when Sister Susan at that time, now Mother Capitolina, came, she would come to the nursing home with me also and help me to administer communion to the people. And this, of course, there's Anatoly Latanov, who many of you know. Go back to that one picture there. And the nurse is holding a little baby that was 1.5 pounds old when I baptized the baby. And as far as I know, the baby has survived, and I hope is still living today. There's another scene from Christmas time and starring that was introduced. And going to the hospital, taking the Christmas star, and I'm so happy that this custom has been elaborated in Anchorage, and I believe that you go for an entire week now taking the Christmas star, because I know how uplifting this is to all the people who aren't able to come to church.
That's Vladimir and Matishka Tamara.
That's Matishka Tamara, and that's our Vladimir standing there with the star. And just while we're on the star, I'd just like to mention one particular person, Tommy Yako. Tommy Yako was one of the first seminarians at St. Herman Seminary. It was pastoral school at that time in Kenai. And Tommy knew that we didn't have a Christmas star. And so he thought about the Christmas star, and he thought about our modern transportation in Anchorage, that we have to get in and out of automobiles. And so he designed a star that would fold up like an umbrella. And I believe the star is still here on the premises someplace at the Cathedral. But he made it in such a way that it would fold up. And when did he bring it? He bought a ticket for himself, and he bought a ticket on the airplane for the star, so he could have the star sit right next to him on the seat. And he came on Christmas Eve so that we could have the star. Unfortunately, Tommy Yako drowned about a year or two after he did this, but we always think of him. These were the institutions that I served at that time. Having come here in 1967 and having made the plans for us and accommodated us so that we would have a place to worship at the old Greek church and to have a home, as I had described to you, with the moose horns over it, that he had to leave, being transferred to Pittsburgh. And he was here from 1967 to 1973. And one of the wonderful things about Bishop Theodosius was his generosity, his love for us and his love for all the people. And this lot that we are standing on right now was donated by Bishop Theodosius. We had several lots that we had purchased, but we didn't have enough room for the building of the church. And he, who bought this a lot before, donated it to the church. And when we were here for several years, and I guess we kind of looked a little tired out, and we were talking about leaving Alaska and going back to places that we're more familiar with and so forth, he said, "Stace, Nick," he said, "you need a vacation." And he pulled out his wallet and helped us so that we could have a vacation. And at that time, Western Airlines had a triangle, which was called a triangle. And I went down to see the traveling agent, and he said, "Well, why don't you go to Hawaii?" And I started laughing. I said, "We're going to Philadelphia. We don't have the money to go to Hawaii." He said, "For $100 more, I'll get you to Hawaii also." So we had a wonderful vacation, and thanks be to our Metropolitan Theodosius. And not only was he helpful in this way, but sometimes when he would come back from the Kuskokwim and other areas, he would even babysit our children. This was our first diocesan assembly. And in remembering this assembly, I remember Father Norman Elliott, our Episcopal priest friend for many years, who fell asleep in the Lord about a year ago, and I had the good fare to see him several years ago when I gave a presentation up at St. John's in Eagle River. And this was All Saints Church, and this was the first assembly. And one of the comical things about this, we had our first gathering, and we had a deacon whose name was Deacon Ivanov from Kenai. And of course, Deacon Ivanov was not used to being with a bishop and with lots of priests. And he would be a little nervous. And every time he would come near someone, he would say, "Premutros, premutros." And Bishop Theodosius said, "Nobody get near him." It's one of the more comical things. But this was our first assembly in 1968. This was our home, which is still standing here, of course, and that's Bishop Gregory outside, and he's, whatever he's doing with the kids there playing. And that was our fourth home and the final home in Anchorage. Next. Norma Goodman is somebody that most of you may not know, but Molodyko, after I found out that I could not live on $400 a month, with the salary that the church was able to give me at that time, I asked Bishop Theodosius for his blessing if I could seek employment. And one of the things that I never imagined in my life was driving a school bus. And I drove it for 20 years. And there may be a couple of you in here that are older that drove with me or were my, in fact, two of the people that are here today is Father Michael Alexa and Matushka Ksenia, because when they were going on their honeymoon, there wasn't time for me to get into my car. I had my school bus going, and I took them in the school bus to the airport on their honeymoon. I never got reprimanded for it. Next. This was the church that we had in mind in the beginning. Standing next to me is a very good friend of our church who has passed on some years ago from Seattle, Washington, John Kotunovich. And he and his wife Isabel had come to visit many times in Alaska. And this was the model that we had, that was the model of our first architect, whose name was Vitaly Berezny. Next. A parish for all Alaska was actually not coined by us, but it was coined by the editor of the Anchorage Times. And after hearing our story about how we were making efforts to serve all the people in Alaska, that all of our people had to come here at one time or another for different reasons, he called it a parish for all Alaska. And it stuck with us after that. This was a van which we drove up from Philadelphia in 1974 that was donated to us by the Philadelphia FROC, the Federated Russian Orthodox Clubs. One of the visitors that we had many hierarchs that came to visit our church. And this was the late Metropolitan Theodosius of Japan, the Japanese Metropolitan, and his assistant, Father Roman Okawa. And they came to visit us, and then we went to the old Oriental Garden, not Oriental Gardens, but what was the other one? Nico Gardens. And he commanded everything to be brought to our table, and we had a wonderful time. And over there in the bottom is Nikolai Do, the Cathedral of the Resurrection of our Lord, which is affectionately called Nikolai Do because it was built by St. Nicholas Kosatkin, who was the missionary in Japan. These are some of the visiting hierarchs that came to our church. And you see they're not all from the OCA, some are from different countries, and even as far as Cyprus, Metropolitan Chrysostomos, and Bishop from Magadan, and of course, heading it all was Patriarch Alexei II of Russia, and all the other bishops that were here. Our cathedral is probably visited by more bishops than any other church in the OCA. Here's our little church, and when I say you have to step up, and then you go down, into this little doorway, and underneath is our church, where we're sitting right now. And the cupola was made by one of our Yupik priests, Father Zachary Guest. Does anyone remember Father Zachary Guest? And Father Zachary came and he saw our little church and he said, I can make a cupola. I said, well, what should we do? He said, just come with me, we buy some materials. He didn't have anything to measure, he simply eyeballed it, and there was our cupola and the cross. He was responsible for building about 14 churches in Alaska, Father Zachary Guest. And there's our cathedral today. And this is the Holy Transfiguration. No, this is our basement chapel, right here, where we're sitting. This was the iconostas going across. And before the iconostas was made, that's what we had, just a little
Arch.
what do you call it on top?
Arch.
Right, an archway.
Yeah.
I'm 82, you have to forgive me.
It's okay, you're an archpriest.
Okay, next. This is Pascha. And Pascha was always a wonderful, wonderful experience. In fact, I remember in coming after the cathedral was built, we would go outside and we would wait about 15 minutes for the rest of the people to come out of the cathedral. And then when we would come in, there would still be 100, 150 people inside that weren't able to go around the cathedral. So Pascha was just fantastic all the time. This is a very important part of our life also because our Bishop Theodosius was the one who represented the Orthodox Church in America to fly to Moscow and be greeted by Metropolitan Pimen, who became the Patriarch a little bit later. And there were some of our priests with Bishop Theodosius and the Russian priests with their bishops. And this was the Thomas of autocephaly, which happened in 1970. And that's when the Russian Orthodox Greek Catholic Church in America became the autocephalous Orthodox Church in America. Now we're coming to the canonization of St. Herman. And what a fantastic joy this was for us to participate in the canonization. Next. One of the great men in our parish was Herman Keithley. Does anyone remember Herman Keithley? Herman was a construction man. He owned a lodge down at Porter's Glacier. He had built that lodge also and was a very specialist carpenter. And he was given the honor to build the casket for St. Herman. It's all cedar lined. This is the delegation beginning to form, coming into Anchorage first and then going to Kodiak. And Metropolitan Irenaeus is the one kissing the cross. And Archbishop Paul of Finland is next to him with his jezzel or his staff. And in back of him is Mayor George Sullivan of Anchorage. And I'm greeting them with a cross. Metropolitan Paul of Finland, it was a very saintly man. We loved him so much in his coming. And one of the incidents that happened before the canonization actually took place was that our daughter, Molodyko Tamara, who's with us today and who's going to lead the choir tomorrow, she came down with an awful fever. And we spoke to the doctors and they said to bring her to the hospital right away, that it may well be that she has meningitis. And Bishop Theodosius had returned from some of the outlying areas of Alaska, and he thought that maybe he was one who was carrying it. In any event, Metropolitan Paul went into Tammy's room, he laid his hands upon her, he prayed, and the next day she had no fever. We all traveled to Kodiak for the canonization of St. Herman. So we remember Metropolitan Paul very affectionately. And here, for those of you who haven't been able to go to Spruce Island, This is and that's the casket that our Herman Keithley made that now is containing the relics of St. Herman. And this is the reliquary in Kodiak, of which many of you who have traveled to Kodiak know about and have venerated. We were called the Russian Orthodox ambassadors, and that's our family all together. That little statue is not one of our family. I don't know how he got in there, but he's there. Thanks. Ellen Fagano, she's here today, and there's Mary Berdikovsky, two of the nicest women that I've ever met. Mary in particular, who was our sisterhood president for so many years, and nothing could replace Mary. She was always there, always working, always doing something for the church. And she was the one who gathered Ellen and all the ladies in the sisterhood for all different kinds of projects, so that we owe so much to them for the building of St. Innocent's Cathedral. One of our great guests was Father Alexander Schmemann, and he's wearing the vestments that were made for me with the Alaskan, with the embroidery of flowers and so forth on it. And he's there with Bishop Gregory on the top, giving him the cross. And it was always a joy to see Father Schmemann. And Father Schmemann was a man of great humor, in addition to being a great theologian. And he would talk with our seminarians at St. Herman Seminary, and he would tell them about the priesthood, that they should be light at heart. He said, you know, there are some priests that become so grumpy that when they walk past a glass of milk, it becomes sour. Don't be like that. Next. The great entrepreneur, the one who jumped ship from Greece, that came here many years ago, that came, and he was known as the Muldoon Strip King, Strip Mall King, not Strip King, Strip Mall King. Don't quote me on that. Strip Mall King. And one day he called on the telephone, Matishka answered the phone, and he said, I want to see Father. He spoke in his Greek accent, you know. He said, tell him to come see my office. So I came by his office, and he said, what are you doing in building? So I said, well, we have an architect, but he really can't get us any further than in the basement. And what kind of money do you have? I said, we don't have any money. And do you have anything else, you know, going for? No. He said, how about if I put up the frame of the church? I get the architect. I'll take care of all the expense. I came home to Matishka and I said, oh my goodness, I never had such a wonderful day in all my life. This man is going to build. And of course, it didn't all happen at once. It took place over a period of years, but it all happened. And it was his idea that when I showed him the plans that we had for a small little church, about 40 by 40, something like that. Father, church too small, you need a big church, big. That's what we have today, big church. And thanks to Uncle Pete that we called him Summerello. One of the great people involved in the building of this church is Ron Robbins, who I hope will be with us tomorrow. Macarius is his church name. And there he is talking with Vladika Gregory and building the church. And it was he that was on our church council, and we were kind of stuck in the mud. We had materials that Pete had donated to the church, but there was no way for us to build. And he was a building construction man. And he said, maybe we can put together our own crew. And we did. And we put our own crew together, and it took a long time, but the church is built today. The lower 48, together with Archbishop Clement, who was the exarch of the patriarchal church in America. And this is the way the cathedral looked inside. And what was happening, we were able to come into the upper area of the church in the warmer months, in the summertime. And before that, we would be down here in the basement chapel. And then before Pascha, usually around the middle of Great Lent, around the Adoration of the Holy Cross, we would go upstairs, and we had a couple bingo heaters that I called that would give a little heat, but there wasn't any insulation, but they helped a little bit. And this is the way that we had the church when Metropolitan Theodosius and Archbishop Clement came, and the roof was still not in place. And you know what happens sometimes on St. Elias Day? What happens? What comes down from the sky? Rain. And it poured, and it poured. And our ladies are running around with pots trying to catch all the drops and everything. And in the morning, the delegation arrived. A beautiful day. But before that beautiful day, when I was hearing confessions, Molodyko Anastasia came running in. She said, Father, come out quick. And I thought, oh, what happened? A double rainbow was over our church. A double rainbow on the eve of St. Elias. A sign from God that the path would be accomplished. So that was the way it was. We never missed a service. We never missed a service. We were worshiping in a church that, I guess, in the legal understanding of things, we shouldn't have been there. Only at that time, the basement church. And hundreds of people came from all different walks of life to venerate the Sister Madonna. And we were most happy the Mother of God came in her icon. This was a delegation in 1989 that appeared in Alaska, and Bishop Gregory wasn't here at the time, and Molodyko and I tried to be as host and hostess as much as possible. This is the advent of the bell which we have in church. This is one of four bells which were crafted. Two of them are in Russia, and the other bell is down at the Old Believers in Nikolaevsk, and it commemorates the discovery of Alaska in 1741. And this was the gentleman who came representing the Patriarch of Russia to bring the bell to us, and Bishop Gregory is explaining to everyone the significance of it. Agafangel Merkuliev.
Yeah.
He is the one who I know prays for us constantly. And this largest cupola, which is on the cathedral, is in his memory because he was killed in construction on January the 14th. And it was the saddest day of our lives when this happened. He was taking down one of the walls that was not part of the construction architectural scheme of the new cathedral. And he and Bill Bowens, who was a subdeacon, were cutting from the bottom, and unfortunately they cut a little bit too much on the bottom, and the wall came down on the both of them. And Bill went in with a fractured pelvis and other fractures, and he survived, but Agafangel did not. And eternal be his memory. These are the blessing of the cupolas. And if you haven't counted them, there are 12 all together on top. And the biggest one is 20 feet high and 16 feet in diameter. And that's the one that's in memory of Agafangel Merkuliev. And what a glorious day this was when the cupolas were being blessed and the crosses were being placed. And then the cranes came in and started installing everything. What joy it was seeing this cathedral come to life. There's His Eminence Archbishop Gregory, and Archimandrite Innocent with his mitre is next there, and the other priests and so forth were serving. And there's the crosses that go on top. The cupolas were made by the old believers in Kenai Peninsula at the village of Nikolaevsk, although they had a factory in Homer, and that's where they were built. With the exception of the two largest ones, they were built right on the spot here. And when I had gone to different places, and I had been to one Russian architect in New Jersey, he told me that it would cost $250,000 for 3 cupolas. The church at that time was the smaller model. Thanks be to God. Now we need the bells. How are we going to get bells? We have to have a contingent of at least 9 bells. And next picture, well, that's not the bells. But I'll tell you when we see the picture. This is Pascha, 1992, and that's the way the church looked inside. We still did not have insulation. Word is being spread that the Patriarch of Russia is coming to us in 1993. What are we going to do? The church is like a stable inside with all of its framework and no insulation, nothing, no walls. And this is where our native corporations came in. And thanks be to Chuck Totemoff and to Dmitry Filomonov, to Ilyador, and to so many others that with the knowledge that the Patriarch of Russia was coming, that we had no time, we had to get things ready. The contributions began rolling in, and the corporations saw fit that they would give us loans, and some of them being forgiven. And this is what we were able to do before the Patriarch of Russia came in 1993. This was one of the brochures that we sent out to people, showing what we were striving to do in Alaska to build. And down in the corner there is Mary and George Verdakovsky, who are being crowned on their 50th wedding anniversary. Thanks. Yuri Sidorenko is the one who's responsible for the icons that you see in church. And this was one of the inauguration brochures that we had made. And the bicentennial icon of the Saints of Alaska. And one of the things that I think is not brought out so much anymore is that this cathedral is not just the cathedral, but it is the bicentennial cathedral of the Orthodox Church in America, commemorating the 200th anniversary of the church in 1994. This was a letter which I sent out to the benefactors, all of those who are helping us, and in addition, oh, I think I need it, huh? That's my son. Thank you. This is a letter that we sent out, and thank you to everybody. Next. The blessing of the cornerstone, Patriarch Alexei and Metropolitan Theodosius. Next. Talking about the bells, I'm back to the bells now, and it was Theodora who made it possible for us to get the bells. And in the early days after the fall of communism, it was very difficult to do business with Russia. You could not do it through check, you couldn't do it through Visa or anything of that sort. It had to be cash. And the cash had to be with you. And she would wear a money belt. And she would carry the cash with her. And we were, as far as I know, these were the first bells that were made by the foundry which was closed by the communists, the Pyakov foundry in the Caucasus in Russia. And we were the first ones to receive them. And like the cupolas, it was almost a gift. The bells were less than $11,000, which today would probably be over $100,000 for the bells, because if any of you have ever been up in the belfry, you will see that each bell is inscribed with St. Innocent, the icon of St. Innocent on it, and it's all written in Slavonic and has the dates on it and so forth. They're beautifully done, beautifully done. And maybe someday the day will come where there will be a bell tower where these bells could actually be seen and would be even heard a lot greater than they are today. But these are the benefactors of the altar table which we serve in church today. That's Matushka Gromov, of blessed memory. Her husband was Father Ishmael Gromov, who I had the good occasion to visit many times and bring him Holy Communion when he was convalescing here. And of course, there's our Matushka Kathy back there, and Mary Berdikovsky, who together are the ones who sponsored the altar table. And it all came from Russia. We had so many things coming from Russia at the time, and our people were so generous. I would put out tables with everything on them, and within 24 hours, everything would be taken by our people, wanting to generously contribute towards the sacred vessels of the church and canonization of St. Yaakov. There's Archbishop Gregory, Metropolitan Theodosius, Archbishop Herman, and others who are here. I believe we had about 12 hierarchs that were here at that time. They're washing the altar with holy water and wine. As you have probably been told, the likeness of the consecration of the altar is likened to baptism and chrismation. There's our good father, Proto-Presbyter Joseph Kreta. He was the first dean of St. Herman Seminary, and behind him is Father Archimandrite Innocent. And over there is Father Bobby, who was our chancellor at the time. Metropolitan Theodosius is carrying the relics. He carried them all the way around the outside of the exterior of the church, and then brought them in where they were placed into the altar at the time of consecration. Assisting him is Archbishop Gregory and Archbishop Herman, who became Metropolitan Herman. And they were making the entrance coming into the church. He and I that were talking about Alaska when he was the pastor of the Holy Resurrection Church in Kodiak, and he had called me one hot summer night in Baltimore where I was at St. Andrew's Church, and he said he talked to Bishop Ambrossi, and they both concurred that it would be good if I would come to Alaska to take his place in Kodiak. And I sat down a few days later and wrote him a 10-page letter. I typed it all out. And I waited and waited and waited, and no answer would come. Finally, I called, and Matushka said, well, Father doesn't like to write, but he's in one of the villages now. I said, well, when can I see him? He said, he's coming to New York to Metropolitan Irenaeus' 50th anniversary jubilee. I said, I'll be there. We sat down with Father Macarius, brought him home to Baltimore, and he announced to my congregation that I would be taking his place. I was to prepare my Proshenia, which is the resolution asking to be transferred to Alaska, and he would write his to come to the lower 48. And again, another month and another month passed by, and I called Father Tushte, who was our chancellor in New York, and I said, what's wrong? He said, well, Father hasn't said anything as yet. And I called up, and Matushka said, he changed his mind. So, Metropolitan Irenae asked, do you still want to go to Alaska? I said, yes. He said, then would you go and organize a new parish in Anchorage? And that's how we came to Anchorage. So thanks to Father Macarius, we came to Anchorage to begin the work here. It was God's will that we not go to Kodiak, but that we come here. And I say these things not arbitrarily about Father Macarius, because he and I sang many duets together and Russian songs and so forth, and we just enjoyed the company being together. And I remember him always. Metropolitan Irenae, and behind him, does anyone know who that is?
Future Archbishop Gregory
That's
Velasquez?
Bishop Gregory, right. When he was Father George Afonsky, who was the pastor of St. Nicholas Church in Portland, Oregon.
I was cheating.
These were the assemblies that were held, and you could see Anchorage became more and more important. This is our little group of priests that we had in the beginning. They were the ones that were here. We had 15 priests serving all of Alaska, and I'm sad to say, but I say it in thanks be to God, the other ones have passed on to their reward, and I'm the only one among them who's living today. And they were all wonderful priests in their own right, and they served the church in the best capacity as they possibly could. And now we're growing. You see, in 1972, we have a few more. All of these are priests with the exception of one that's below me, which is Protodeacon Innocent. Father Michael Lestinkov, Father Vasily Epchuk, Father Haraton Kaikohokanat, Father Zachary Guest, Father Nicholas Kamkov, Father Presbyter Joseph Kreda, Father Vasily Zivsov, Father Nikolai, who is Matушka Olga's husband, and myself there, Father Simeon Oskokov, Igumen Kirill Bulasevich, Father Ishmael Gromov, Father Makarios Dragansky, and now we're growing more. 1990, we're now at Anchorage at the very incomplete Cathedral of St. Innocent. There's our Father Peter Borskowski when he was deacon at the time. And what a deacon he was, and what a wonderful priest. So happy that he was attached with us and helped me so much at St. Innocent's. I knew that I could travel many different places because Father Peter would always be taking good care of everything. Next. As time went on, and it was very sad to see him go, we didn't know what was going to happen after that, but lo and behold, how God provides. First, Proto-Presbyter Joseph Kreda came, and his vision was for St. Herman's Pastoral School, which developed into St. Herman's Seminary, beginning first in Kenai and then being transferred to Kodiak. And he was the administrator of the diocese in 1972. And Father Paul Merkuliev was so much of his being his assistant, helping in every way at the seminary, teaching there, and in so many other capacities. first time that a patriarch of Russia had come to Alaska. This is the welcoming at the airport, at the international terminal. And many dignitaries are there in greeting Patriarch Alexei and Metropolitan Theodosius, Metropolitan Paul of Finland, and so forth. There's the red carpet out for the Patriarch. And speaking about the Patriarch, one of our wonderful friends is here today, Larry Moore. And Larry Moore will be with us tomorrow also. He's the one that did all the video work. So that if anybody is ever interested, we have a 7-tape videotape, which are about 2 to 2.5 hours long each tape, that covers the entire services of the advent of Patriarch Alexei and his visits throughout central Alaska. I see Mother Kapitolina there, and next to her is Matushka, and all those other people all waiting to receive Holy Communion. We had many, many, many people that day. One of the banquets that was held in honor of the Patriarch, I had celebrated the liturgy, and we were waiting in anticipation for the coming of Archbishop Gregory and Father Krita and Father Simeon and their wives. And we were making a procession from the church, and the Starosta, Andy Allen from Cordova, said, "Father, the bishop's plane has crashed." And we saw what looked like smoke going up. It was all the dust going. And we started running up the runway. I had my cassock and kamalak and cross on and running. I had the cross to greet them. And there was Father Joseph helping out Archbishop Gregory and Father Simeon and their wives. And fortunately, the only one that was seriously hurt, that didn't appear to be hurt at the time, was Father Joseph. He suffered a lot of pain after that and had to have medical checkups and so forth following that crash. But the plane was coming into land, and fortunately the pilot was able to disconnect the fuel so that it did not explode. But we were also happy, and we went to the church and celebrated a moleben of thanksgiving to God that everybody was safe. This was, I believe, the only church in Alaska where the airstrip comes right up to the church. You have to walk about 30 feet, and you're in church. And like every place in Alaska, when a priest comes, and of course when the bishop comes, it's even more so, everyone comes up to receive his blessing. And then we go into the church. And the church that I'm talking about is St. Herman's Church in Port Graham. And I know that Lydia and Jeff are here from there, and whoever else is here from. And she was my Chiniga mama. She took care of me when I was in Chiniga. And before that, when we first came to Alaska, she was here with Father Nicholas. He was not a priest then, he was a reader. And one of the most saddest things that happened was that in the earthquake, the tsunami was centered right where they lived, in Chiniga. And the earthquake began in such a way that the waters in the bay would recede. And Father, with his daughters, 3 daughters, were on the lower level near the beach. And Matushka was at a higher level with her sons. And Father knew that when the water would recede, it would come back with tremendous force. It would be a tsunami. And he grabbed his 3 daughters and started running to higher ground. 2 of his daughters were taken from his arms and were never seen again, as well as many other people in Chiniga who suffered and fatally in the earthquake tsunami. And I was very honored to serve in Chiniga many, many times. And one of the outstanding things that the Chiniga people did every summer was, after their village was completely demolished, and finally with the efforts of Father Nicholas Kompkov, with the efforts of Chuck Tonomov's dad, and with others in the Chiniga Corporation, they were able to establish a new Chiniga. But every year they remembered to go back to Old Chiniga, and that's where we are. No, we're not. We would go back there, but the grave of Father Nicholas is at the new Chiniga. I'm thinking of another slide. Maybe that'll come up next. You'll see it. Next. This is the planting of the cross for the new church in Chiniga, which today is exemplary of the village churches in Alaska, what the village churches could really be as it is in Chiniga. A beautiful church, and I believe, Molodyko David, you've already blessed all the icons from top to bottom,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
And it must be like going into heaven itself.
It is.
There, because I remember, and this was the beginning when we blessed the foundation. And the last church that I was to in 1999, before we retired to Florida, was at the consecration of the Nativity of the Theotokos Church in Chiniga on the day after we had our last service here. And he knew to get his dollars worth. He gave me the name Anapuk. I'm not going to. Father Jonah told me that I mispronounced it today, but I always say Apanupuk. And he said, you say Anapuk. Never mind, Ananupuk is going to say. And I said, Father, what does Apanupuk mean? Oh, Father, he said, he was a great warrior. When he commanded, everybody listened. Oh, you told me I have a big mouth. I said, what's your name? He says, Chaguyak. I said, what's Chaguyak mean? He says, smelly feet. And whenever I'd see him, I said, Chaguyak. He said, Apanupuk. There's our good friend, Father Vasily Sivsov, Aleut priest who made his home in Dillingham. And he was the dean of the Nushagak churches there. And he was so interested in our building the church in Anchorage. He said, Father, you have to come to Dillingham. You have to come to my parishes. We want to help you. And I did. I went with him, and he would interpret for me, and I would serve, and he would sing in the choir. And about 2-3 weeks after coming back home, I would go out to get the mail, and there would be an envelope about this thick. And I would open it up. There would be 5s, 10s, 20s, so sometimes $100 bill and so forth. Cash coming through the mail, up to $1,000. And this happened a number of times. You know, the gentleness of the Alaska Native people, their trust in the mailing system and so forth. Nobody was going to steal it. It was unbelievable. And this started another flow of many people helping us to build our church. And I owe it to Father Sissoff. I was quite skinny in those days. And there I am with Father Innocent. And Father Innocent stayed at our house, our All-American Council in Pittsburgh. And it was the first time that he had ever left Alaska. And he remarked about it ever since, you know, how life was so different and everything. And he was wonderful to be with. And there's Matushka Olga, and we hope and pray that God in His mercy will recognize her as a saint, as we recognize her already. And there's my fishing partner, Father Harry Kaikohokanak, who was about 95 pounds soaking wet. And this was his boat. And he invited me to come out fishing with him in the summertime, so we would have a little bit extra, you know, and be able to have a vacation and so forth. And Molodyko and the kids, we all went. And he arranged for a little cabin for us to live in for about a month. And he and I fished together, and he was one of the kindest men that I ever met. And when I would stand in church on Sunday, if my vestments were not quite right, he would come right up to me as I'm speaking and fasten me and so forth. And Molodyko she was working at a gallery downtown. He would have one of the servers at the hotel bring her in a tray her lunch that day and so forth. He's so kind in many, many ways. The history of the Orthodox Church in Alaska, the history of the Church in America, and Christ in the Church. And I remember when Father Tim was a student, and he said to Father Tim, he said, "You read my book, Christ in the Church, and you will get honors."
Summa cum laude.
And he has received honors since then. There's our Father Paul Merkuliev and Matushka Elizabeth. And I'm so happy to wear one of the crosses that Father Paul had left for me through his wife, Matushka Elizabeth. And he's left other things for me and for others, I'm sure. And he was a great friend. We knew him as a young deacon. He was working as a carpenter in Seattle. And when he found out about what we were doing, he came back to help us and stay with us for the rest of his life. May his memory be eternal. I don't think you know this guy. Does he need any introduction?
No, I think we all know.
There he is. Father Michael and I, in our younger days, celebrating liturgy at the Cathedral in the lower level. Yeah, and you all know about Father Michael and how happy it is that he's still here in Alaska. And one of our great friends who spent much time in our cathedral as a reader and as the poet laureate of Alaska, and his wife Nora was Dick Dowenauer, and his church name was John. And being a church reader, I often asked him if he would give homilies, which he did. And he also taught in the adult class. These were the vestments that were made by Emma Marks, which was the mother of Nora, the wife of Dick Dowenauer. And they were made for the consecration with all the beautiful embroidered little animals and sea creatures and so forth on them that was depicting the beautiful creation which God had given us. Byron Birdsall, he's the one who gave us, he painted the icon of the four saints. And unfortunately, Byron fell asleep in the Lord this last year. And one of the things that he did for us before we left, we had a riza, which is the garment of the icon, but not the icon itself, which we found beautiful pearls in Florida. And we found it in an antique shop. And we brought it up to Alaska, and we asked if he could do an icon for us. And on the night before we left, at the Molevin service that was held, he gave us the icon, which we have in his honor in our home in Florida. Mike Lakanov, how can anybody forget Mike? What a wonderful, gentle soul he was, how loving he was, how patient he was with everybody in the choir, and how we had such a wonderful time. We traveled to the Far East in Siberia, and our choir, a cappella choir, sang there under his direction. And he was a composer of many different works, and we miss him so much. God bless him. The older picture is Mary and George, Mama B as we call her, being crowned on their 50th wedding anniversary in the basement church here. And this is Father Peter Bordakovsky and Matushka Catherine. And I can never thank Father Peter and Matishka, Catherine, enough for all that they have done for the church and for the many times that Father Peter took care of the church while I was gone to be able to get to other places. And they've been wonderful to us, and we have loved them and continuously to have them as our family all these years. Here's the 30th anniversary of St. Innocent Cathedral, and you see we have a small contingent of nuns. Mother Christophora, who then was the
To bless you, O Theotokos, and the blessed and most pure and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption, thou gavest birth to God the Word. True Theotokos, we magnify you. One final word. We want to thank